am.
Warning. The following content may contain elements that are not suitable for some audiences. Viewer discretion is advised.
Good afternoon, good morning, good evening, depending wherever you are. And Lauren is here with me, as you all know. But let me do a very quick intro. After a 2-week hiatus due to Dreamforce and the back to work, I think it was, we are back with Whispered Insights and with the best co-host anybody could ever have, Dr. Lauren Vargas. Lauren, in case somebody doesn't know you, make a quick 30-second intro.
I'm a digital dragon wrangler. How's that?
There you go. That sounds perfect to me. And that's where we are. So what are we talking about today? We're talking about today the role communities play in decision making. And this is actually a very timely. I saw a couple things yesterday when I was cruising through the webs, surfing the webs, like we used to say. People are starting to talk more and more about communities away from the marketing value that they always had, right? And more like something that could be strategic, and that's fine, because that's kind of like what I wanted to talk to you about. I invited you because, like I said in my promo, and in case you haven't read the promo, I invited you because.
Oh, you're on mute.
Yeah, so I got to mute it. I don't know how I got muted. It's okay. So you got invited because you are the only person I know that has done communities across every single aspect of life. You have done it for the government, for the private sector, for the public sector, and nonprofits. Which the last two could be combined into one. But I think that you have an incredible amount of experience, and that's why I invited you. But let's get started with the simple stuff. I'm not going to ask you what's a community, because we're going to be here for all the whole hour for this. But why do communities matter more now than they did in the past?
Oh, I don't know if I accept the premise of that question, because I think they've always mattered. It's just a matter of whether the powers that be have seen the value in communities, or not use them, but held the space with them in a way that is beneficial for all parties involved. So I think we've gone through, at least, and community was around, online digital community, definitely around before, I entered, the space in the late 90s, early aughts. And so I give credit to those pioneers that definitely held that space before me. So I think that when we talk about communities and what the role of communities are, we've had these different waves, these different cycles of community, and thinking about who is community, what is community for, why community. And I think that as we are starting to grapple with I think the evolution of the web, the continued evolution of the web, and really thinking about different types of power dynamics and the different types of generated content. I think we're starting to see a regeneration, a enhanced thinking. I hope an enhanced thinking, an enhanced importance of what communities can and could be.
Yeah, but that doesn't address the question. I mean, I agree. Well, but seriously, you don't like the premise,
No.
and I'm okay with that premise, right? I'm okay with that. But the thing is, like, I think that the role of the community has changed, and I think it has become more important. I don't think it's related to the web. I mean, like you said, a PTA used to be a community.
I think
there was value to that.
I think maybe the role has changed because maybe our not just the web, but definitely the circumstances in our social, economic, environmental, and political context have definitely changed alongside. Yes, for sure. I completely agree with that.
Yeah. I think that people are feeling more comfortable partly thanks to the webs and social and online, but also partly because the society has evolved to express their opinions. And oh my God, yeah, the polarized societies that we lived in made it so that you care more about your opinion than other person's opinion. But this is a good part to me. I think that communities, when they're diverse, are more interesting than the old-fashioned
Mhm.
communities where everybody agree with everybody else, right?
Ah,
So I think that
did
we're
they?
come on, you used to be in those communities, you know that. I mean, everybody
Yeah, and
was
I
just
had to
like,
manage a lot of conflicts.
yeah, but the conflicts is just like, egocentric. They're not real conflicts. I mean, whether something is purple or blue doesn't make a fucking difference at the end of the day. But that's what the conflicts were. People will go to war over purple versus blue. But the truth of it is, like, I think that the diversity is what becomes a really more interesting tool, which is what we're trying to discuss today, becomes a much more interesting tool for executives and people making decisions to tap into the community and get better information, right?
Completely agree. And it's how
Okay.
it's when we're bringing communities into that decision making, into that thought process, into that decision making process, bringing them in earlier and no longer thinking about them or accepting that they are just tokenistic, that it truly is an integrated, um, a reassessed power dynamic. I think there's a lot of, I feel more hope and optimism now when it comes to community than I think I ever have in the last 2 decades.
Okay. Well, that's a good place to start. Why?
Why? Because I am I am hopeful that we are challenging power dynamics, that we're not accepting kind of that one size fits all, voice, that we are not just accepting that and calling out when a community is being used in a tokenistic way, that there is there's some teeth around the accountability of the power dynamics between a community, between and betwixt a community and and an organization, or whatever its guiding entity may be, if it's something other than itself. So I think we have I think we have some really wicked problems. And the only way in which we are going to address these wicked problems, not just address, but to be able to recognize both the novel and the emergent practices that we need to have all over us, not just accept kind of like this ordered realm of practice, but really start to kind of live in that world of change and complexity. And I think the only way we can do that is with diverse communities helping us surface, helping us test, helping us recognize what should be done and should not be done.
I 10,000% agree. And I think that's a good place to start this conversation going forward, right? Let's settle that that's the current state of communities, and that's what we're
Yeah.
seeing in the marketplace and the workplace and everything, because both internal and external communities are coming up more that way, right? I don't think the format matters, whether it's online or in person or like a hybrid or through
Yeah.
social, whatever. The format is irrelevant at this point. But if that's the value of community, then what would you tell an executive that even yourself 10 years ago when you were that executive that is looking to add communities to the mix and trying to find the value that it brings? I mean, what's the reason why communities matter? The topic of this was communities and decision making. Why would a community make a difference in decision making?
One, I think it gives you, I think a community helps give you more insight into helping identify and frame the problems, the challenges. I think sometimes we can get a little navel gazing as organizations and as executives and thinking we know what the problem is, we know what the challenge is, when in reality, we may not know the depth or the nuance of that particular challenge or problem or area. And I think we need more space, more capacity to be able to identify and define these different problem areas and challenges. And I think that's where communities really start to flex, their muscle, because they are the ones that are living with these issues and working with these different practices or solutions or non-essential solutions or non-existent solutions. And so we need to really understand how the community ticks. What are those power dynamics? How are they, facing these particular challenges? How do we not reinvent the wheel? Because I see that all the time, is that reinventing of the wheel without kind of that that craving, or that curiosity for wanting to think that, maybe somebody else has the solution. Maybe we need to, think outside the box. And so I think,
Yeah.
first and foremost, the community helps you to identify and define the problem. So before you even jump into solution mode, you need to, spend more time. You need to have the capacity to really figure out, what is that problem? What is that challenge? What is that issue? And what's the depth and breadth of it?
So before I get to my question, I want to put Alan's comment on screen, because he said,
Sure.
and I agree, communities exist. The challenge for
For sure.
organizations to support and participate. I don't think that support is such a big challenge. I think participation is a bigger challenge, but that's just, half a dozen of one, six of the other, right? But let me ask you a question, follow up to what you were saying. I agree with what you said, but okay, so here's the thing. Let's say that I am the person making the decisions and I listen to the community and I understand what they're saying. And let's say that by happenstance, I don't like what they're saying. They're wrong. They don't know. Did you faced this before? I'm sure.
All
right?
the time. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
So what do you do? How do you convince people that are stalwart in the way of doing business, that the community disagrees with them, and that we should listen to the community, and there's a value to that, and there's something that you can get out of that?
Well, I think it has to do with the comment that was just flashed up on the screen. The community exists with or without you. And so they will find their own solution. They will find their own home or their own support. Those people that will, help enable or foster or cultivate, greater participation and engagement. So don't think that you're the answer to that community's problems, that community's issues, needs, or support. So I think it's recognizing that, if you don't listen, they will walk. They will take agency and counter, whatever it is you might be
Right.
putting out there.
So let them. So what? So what? There's more customers. There's more clients. There's more people, right? Let them do it. Why not?
Depends on who you exist for. I mean,
what does it mean?
If you say as an organization, because it's all, well, I would like to say it used to be in vogue. It's still kind of in vogue, but I think we're moving more to life-centric. But if you're an organization that says we're human-centric, we're this, that, a community stress tests that reality. Because if you're human-centric, you're going to be active listening. And even if you don't agree with what that community is saying, you're having a dialogue, right? You are having that back and forth. You're being open and transparent about what you are doing with that type of information or with that particular feedback. There is a feedback loop. It's not a one-way, very passive approach. And so I think it really depends on who are you for? Because if it's not for, the people, if it's not for the community, if it's not integrating the community, then all right, have your bottom line, go through that, transactional, approach. That might work really well for your organization. But if you're going to plant the flag and say, yes, we're human centric, then you're going to have to walk the walk.
Let's go with that, right? Let's say that you're in for human centric, and let's say that you're going to listen and not like it, but do something about it, right? Can you control that dialogue, that conversation? Can you manipulate it? Can you master it, or are you just going to be a participant listening and not taking it personal.
Oh, well, I'm sure
As an executive listening to you, I'm not going to I'm going to do communities now. This sounds like, people will manage and tell me what to do, and I had to do it.
no, that's not the case. But you're not managing or manipulating the community either. It's
I'm out.
you
Dude,
are
I'm out.
what? No,
I'm
you're
kidding.
out?
I'm kidding. I'm kidding.
No,
I'm
no.
kidding. I'm kidding.
It's first off, you are not controlling that community. If anything, you could hope and work at, having the capacity to be involved and participate and engage in that community, and you have to build the trust of that community. You can't just be like this omnipotent entity. You have to be fully immersed, fully engaged, fully participative, and you are a member of that community just like anybody else
Yeah.
is. And so I think you have to have that give and take.
But I mean, we said that forever, right? We said that forever, that you had to be a member of the community, and yet I don't see the executives that are like in charge of making decisions, whatever, being members of the community. Usually, they would hire somebody. There you go. See, this. I mean, you've been there. You were the community manager, and you were the executive making the decisions for the community. So you had community managers reporting into you. And I mean, were you a member of the communities when you were the executive in charge? Were you actually participating in the dialogue? Forget compliance and regulations and whatever. Were you participating in the open dialogue the community had as an executive, or do you actually delegate that to people at a certain level that have mandates on what to do with it?
It was a mixture of both. Definitely there was, definitely there was distributed, community management and moderation. Obviously, for sure, the most trusted, representatives and the more operational work was definitely being done by community teams. But at the same hand, for me, when I was in that, position of authority, power, whatever you would call it, I felt even more of an obligation to be a participant, to be engaged, to not be this faceless entity. Like I needed to see what was happening on the ground, and I needed to, roll up my sleeves and get my hands dirty and be in the community as well. So I think it needs to be a mix of folks, and now that doesn't mean that that's not comfortable for every single executive, because you have to know what your tone and your voice is, and it might not work for every single person in that particular
So
position.
what when you did that, when you participated as an executive, what did you get out of the community? What did you get that like the people that reported to you didn't tell you?
It's not that they didn't tell me. I think I needed to see the nuance of the conversation. I think I needed to see the language being used and something that wasn't just in some, well-packaged report. I needed to see people not just as, anonymous avatars or numbers on a page, but people with passion, people with purpose, people with uh, different types of needs that were different than my own and my team and my organization.
Okay. And then I love that concept of nuance, by the way, because I mean, you're right. If we all know that when you sit at a certain level, what you get to see is filtered to you, right? You don't see
Exactly.
the word, you don't see the words. You see the
Nope.
nicely makeup cover words, if at all.
Mhm.
So I love that
Oh,
concept. And then
I know we're going to address this comment that we see on the screen from Alan in just a minute, but I do want to say something else. Like, I also wanted to see the dynamic between the community members and my community team, and I needed to see that unfiltered as well. That's not me checking up on them, but I think there is an element of like in real time or when something is situated, what is that context, what is that condition, that helped me get a little bit more perspective.
yeah, and what Alan says, by the way, is a common misconception, because usually communities are only used for support, so they are part of customer service. But a true community does not sit in customer service, and you were proof of that, right? You were not reporting to
Yes.
customer service, if I remember that correctly.
That was correct. I mean, we did
Yes.
have elements, right? We did have,
Yeah. Of course.
spokes of
Yeah.
our community. Yeah, no, I mean, it had to be much more than support. We had to think about the community as, where does it fit across all aspects of the customer journey, the product development, the implementation life cycle. We really needed to think about what were those feedback loops across every single aspect of those journeys, of those experiences.
Yeah. So before we get into the next question, I want to mention, if there anybody who's listening has any questions or comments like Alan does, feel free to add them. YouTube, Facebook, LinkedIn, whatever you're listening, feel free to add. Lauren would love to take questions from people she doesn't know, asking
Bring it
questions that
on.
she doesn't know the answer to. This makes her
I'll
so
say if I don't know.
comfortable. Yeah,
I know, doesn't it?
she's so comfortable with that. So, but so let's go from what you were saying. I mean, you're saying like the nuance, which I love the concept of nuance, and then I love the fact that you were there not checking on your people, but checking on how the role that you were assigned to command for the company is working. Right? Those are the things
Yeah.
that you get out of that. So what do you do with that? I mean, as an executive, what do you do with knowing that Yeah, what do you do with that?
Well, you have to first, find there's I hate this phrase, but I don't know how else to maybe introduce it. But like, there is an art and a science to community management, community engagement, and I think part of that really starts internally. So it's thinking about what are the different ways in which my team can begin to share this information, the feedback that we are getting, with the right people at the right time. It can't be some, report that nobody reads, that's, produced daily, weekly, monthly, quarterly, whatever that cadence might be. Yes, those reports are important if they're used to help create a collective memory for decision making. I'm all for that. But how do we create fit for purpose feedback loops? I think that's incredibly important. So how do we get the right information at the right time to the right people? So whether it's product, whether it's customer service, whether it's design, it's okay, how do we communicate this information? How do we communicate it in such a way that it's not going to be received defensively? And how might we, create some, and you asked me about manipulation and influence earlier. I should probably say, like, what?
You know that I have to do that because this is the only way I know how to
No.
communicate, right? So,
Well, I mean, there's always room for unsolicited feedback, but I think a good community also intentionally solicits feedback. And so finding different ways, different prompts, different spaces in which to continuously ask for information, but not just ask for information, because you don't want to move into an overly extractive or exploitive, community environment, but also figuring out ways in which to not just share this information internally, but also share back out to your community, well, what's being done with this feedback, right? So if there are questions or concerns about the product, what are we doing to answer those? And not answer those in just like in a formulaic way, but, maybe what are some of the reasons behind some of these decisions? Why was a decision made is incredibly valuable, like, input that a community wants to be on the inside, and they want to like feel like they are part of the process. They want to feel like are actively, engaging, not necessarily for your purpose, but for their purpose, for their progress. And I think it's important to, find ways to communicate that internally, and then find ways with that internal community, with those internal stakeholders, with those internal groups, to figure out ways to then communicate that back out in an open and transparent way, or say, this is what we are tangibly doing with that information that you have gifted us, because it is gift.
it is, and I agree with Alan 1,000%.
Yeah.
You know, Yeah, so here comes the part where like I wanted to get to. Thank you for actually kind of
Yeah.
playing along and getting to where I want to. This is working almost like we planned it, even though we never talked about it before. Wink, wink, nudge, nudge. But seriously, I mean, getting people to pay attention internally is the challenge, right? And
Yeah.
I don't know if you ever done this, but I have recommended that to clients who have done it and had really good results. The part where you say, okay, this part of the community conversation pertains to product or pertains to like accounting or pertains to operations, so people that never would participate in the community, so hey, Mr. VP of product, accounting, or operations, I think you should engage with the community. I think you should go and participate, listen, and interact with the community to get, like you said, to get the nuance and to get the details
Mhm.
directly. Have you ever done something like that? Have you ever recommended something like that? Have you ever seen something like that done?
Yeah, I think that okay. I probably maybe shouldn't say this, but I'm okay. I am
Oh,
going
you
to
know
say
what?
it.
Fuck it. Fuck it.
I know.
That's why God
Our
invented
disclaimer,
courtrooms. Okay, this is why God invented
right?
courtrooms. Say whatever you want, and we'll clean it up right in the courtroom.
I I come from a background where, with the exception of maybe one very large role, um, most of my community experience has been in highly regulated organizations and community environments.
Yes, you
And I
have.
feel like
Yes, you
working
have.
within those constraints. So I'm going to say this with that caveat because, well, I have dealt with some pretty, people joke sometimes, and it's not a joke, that, you know, community management is not life or death. I beg to differ because in a lot of the instances where I was working, it was very much life or death. But I I've managed some very difficult, very crunchy conversations externally, in those community environments or within those discrete community environments. However, the most difficult portion of my job, no matter what role, what organization I have been in, has been the internal engagement piece. Hands down. Like
Mhm.
that is the most difficult. So I take a very much work out loud, type of approach where I am narrating my work, my team's works, why we're making these, various decisions. Like, not only am I doing this doing this at a community level, I am doing this at an internal community level, which can really kind of upset the apple cart pretty quickly. But one of the things that I always found, I think, beneficial in trying to get people to consider what is the value of community engagement is to really work on developing some structured community type of engagement, community engagement, or some type of community involvement. So working with teams to really get at, well, how could this feedback help you? What's the right cadence of feedback loop? What would help you what is the right time for feedback to help you?
What is
What
the
is the
follow
right
up? What
way?
is the follow? What is the follow up that you will do with the feedback if we provide it to you?
Exactly. Right.
Yeah.
Like, having to work on a team by team basis, on a project by project basis. This isn't something that you say is a one size fits all. Like, you have to do this reverse engineering behind the scenes, and that takes 99.9% of my time, in these particular roles. It's not necessarily, the community engagement piece where, we do have, play by play approach, and we do have some flexibility, but we've got that scaffolding in place. Whereas that intentional engagement from the inside out, outside in, is something that needs more of that TLC.
So you speaking of engagement, and before we move to the next step, but I don't know if you remember the conversation we had last time you were on the show about engagement and what a magnificent
Mhm.
piece of intelligence that was. But I mean, one of the key conclusions was that engagement is not something that is planned or like set up, but it's something that happens, right? So we're talking about the same thing here. We're talking about you're going to go into the community to see what happens, not with a preconceived notion that I'm going to get
No.
this feedback, put it into the product planning or whatever planning, and that you're just going to go see what happens.
Right. Yeah. And you can do
Got
that,
it.
but you can do so in such a way, right, that is like okay, we want to have this type, we want to put this type of prompt or this type of, you know, request or this type of scaffolding around that engagement. You can't control what happens within that, within that container, but you can, start to create some ways and means to get at that intentional engagement and
Well,
that
you kind of
intentional feedback.
you kind of have to from the compliance and fiduciary position anyway. So you do need some
Oh,
scaffolding. You guys just go
oh
there
yeah.
with. So this is actually kind of what I wanted to get to, right? So now we're like about halfway in, and we're getting to the point where like it becomes interesting because we need a community. It's going to be a diverse community. It's going to be a freestanding community. We're going to participate at all levels. We're going to bring the weird people that don't want to participate and force them to listen directly and take something out of it. We're going to create an engagement with the community. And now I'm the person that has all this information. And like you said, what are you going to do with the feedback, right? So what do you do with the feedback? How do you decide whether to use it or not? How do you say, yeah, this I'm going to ignore, this I'm going to take, or and also the follow-up to that is like, what do you do after you did that? Like you said, you got to go back to your community and reflect what you did. So how do you decide what you're going to share and what you're not going to share? Like fiduciary
Ah,
compliance and all that, right? So let's go with
so
the easy one. Let's go with the easy part first. I mean, what do you do with the feedback? How do you decide to use the feedback as an executive?
I don't think that that's your decision alone. And I know that's
Oh,
kind of a, uh-huh,
but I'm
right.
but I'm but I'm the SVP of like whatever the fuck I do. It is my
Here's the
decision.
thing. I've never been a huge fan of like, different types of terms of service, terms of use, community. There are all these different, types of evolutions of community guidelines. And something that I've carried consistently across my career is the concept of a pact, meaning there are expectations to that are to participate in this community. You need to do BX, but you also need expectations from as community organizers, whether you're an organizing entity or not. um, you need to have some type of expectation management, and I think that part of part of the part of the community growth and development is co-developing and co-creating those expectations with the community itself. What type of feedback is being gathered? How is that feedback being used? What are the mechanisms in which you are filtering through that data? How is that data becoming information, becoming insight? And I think that that has to be done hand in hand with the community. You are moving at the speed of trust. And I think that that is one of those ways that you start to bring community in at the very start. And I know that that might sit
So you
uncomfortably with
you,
a lot
you
of folks.
what you're talking about is basically what Alan Bergson, who's listening today, calls working out loud. I'm going to show you everything that
Oh,
I
yep,
do and why I do it and what I'm doing it,
exactly.
and then you cannot be surprised that I did it and that what I'm telling you that's going to happen.
That is how I've worked for 20 years. Work out loud. Anybody that has ever worked with me, probably loves or hates me. There's no, spectrum in between. And it's because I have a work out loud methodology.
Okay, so you're gonna share everything with the community, saying like, "Welcome to the community. It's not mine; it's yours. You're a valuable member, and we're gonna listen to everything you say within these parameters, right? And then
Correct.
once we get what you're saying within these other parameters, we'll make a decision on whether or not to use it. And if we decide to use it within these parameters, we'll share it back with you.
Not just share it back, but what is the value exchange for that information, for that feedback as well, right? So I think that there are different types of parameters. So there's different types of parameters around communication, around consultation, around collaboration, around convening. Um, and 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 I think that you have to understand and recognize and be explicit about How do you acknowledge? How do you reward? How do you award for those, for various types of contributions? What is that value exchange? Doesn't necessarily have to always be, monetary, but there needs to be an explicit understanding of what that pact is, what the expectation is, and what that exchange is across those different types of engagement or participation.
Well, why isn't the value of the reward in the participation itself versus having to do something to recognize the value? I mean, if I like a product enough to bother myself to join the community for that product, and and I like it enough to say I would like to provide some information, some feedback on this, so like thinking they're gonna do it. Why isn't that the reward? To me, was the participation and the fact that my voice be heard versus like getting whatever. I don't know what you're talking about. I hope it's not gamification, but getting a
No,
tchotchke or a title or
no,
a
no, no,
exclusive access or
no,
whatever.
not that.
Okay.
Not
So
that.
then what are we
No.
talking about, value exchange?
Well, if that is the expectation and that is explicitly agreed upon, fine, right? But I think that so many communities have been created to just suck everything out of every single participant, without acknowledging their contribution. And I think there are ways in which you can, reward, award, and acknowledge in ways that are, not the gamification. I'm not talking about the tchotchkes.
Yeah,
But,
no.
maybe it's access, maybe there, but once again, it comes down to how are you creating this value exchange with your community members, right? If the expectation and the agreed upon expectation is, I'm so passionate and I am so invested in this organization that I just want to freely give, everything, awesome, that's agreed upon. But we can't just take that for granted. We can't create these spaces that have in the past been highly extractive and exploitive. And I think that as we start to think about the role of AI, the hype of AI,
No, that's my last question. You can't throw out of there yet.
okay, I won't go there. I won't go there.
No,
All
I'm
right.
kidding. I'm kidding.
Anyways,
I'm kidding. But
there needs
yes,
to be
yeah,
a value
I agree
exchange.
with you. No, I totally agree with you. This actually may be a good segue into that. I mean, you know that I don't have a structure of mind anyways, but I mean, that's exactly right. I mean, like, this is something I wanted to discuss anyways. I mean, as you go through, I think we got a pretty good framework in place, right? And now let's add AI to this, because what we call AI, which is not real AI about analytics, but that's a separate thing that I digress. What we call AI, right, requires information to function.
Mm-hmm.
And if you're stupid, you think the more the better? Or what? One say?
Where are you getting it?
Well, what are you getting? And again, what can you do with it and all that? I mean, there's like, ethical and legal issues arising that I'm not an expert, and I'm going to leave those aside for now. But let's assume that everything's ethical and legal, how you get the information from the community. But I mean, should you get information from the community? It's pretty gnarly sometimes, like, would that bias your quote unquote AI to say or do something that will go against what you think? And because it's AI, you cannot later contradict it. So then, fuck it, we're fucked. I mean,
I think my biggest concern at this point is so many of these communities have huge repositories of information, dialogue, this massive collective memory. And if those communities are being scraped for all of this information, how is it being repackaged? How is it being used? How does that impact any type of explicit value exchange? I think the use of AI, the use of information feeding the AI needs to be considered in concert with the community.
what does that mean?
Meaning, like, let's talk about what data is being extracted. Let's talk about how that data is going to be used, within that particular model. Now, I think that those conversations.
Hold on.
Go ahead.
Let's go back a second. So here's the thing. I mean, yes, you can filter the data, but you cannot restructure the data. Once the data comes from the community in an unstructured format, and the AI has access to it. You can say,
Correct,
don't
but do they
listen,
know how
don't
it's being
listen.
used?
Who, the community?
Yeah, the community.
We cleared that. It's all ethical and legal. We cleared all that. Let's just skip that part because that's for bigger minds than mine. But seriously, I mean, look, if we're gonna get into that, we're never gonna go anywhere, right? I mean,
Well,
history is not made by the history is not made by the well-behaved ladies here. That was the T-shirt, right, or something like that. What was it like?
right, yeah,
well-behaved women never make history. Let's
that is
assume
true.
that
That is true.
everything's ethical and legal, right? Or that we actually say, fuck it, I don't care, I need the information. But once you agree that you're gonna listen to everybody and maybe exclude Johnny because Johnny's a weirdo and Marisa really doesn't know what she's talking about, and don't look at this product because we got it so wrong that it's gonna be all negative. But once you exclude those things, once you open to AI, the information comes in. You don't get to restructure and control the information that is fed into the machine. This is one of the biggest problems that people don't understand about AI. Once you put into a direction and you put the filters cannot be, oh, if the message is 20% negative, don't listen to it, right? So then, so then we're here we are. We decided that Johnny and Marisa are no-nos. We decided that product is a no-no, but everything else goes into the model. And now it's been trained with partly negative, partly. What if the machine listens to all that and says, you know what, you should shut down this line of product?
Exactly, right? So the biases, that are existent that have these human filters on them, well, both human and tech, but they're working hopefully in concert, although that can't be said for all. But I think we do need to recognize what is being fed into the system, right? What with all of those biases, what is considered information, what is considered part of that collective memory, what is the different types of value or the different context and condition that is associated with that collective memory. Once you start sucking all that up and putting it into an LLM, that's gone, right? And so that's what freaks me out right now as
what
a
makes it so
community
freaking
professional.
cool. That's what makes it so freaking cool to me.
I don't know. That doesn't make me a very popular person. I'll tell you that much.
I gave that up for Lynn 35 years ago. I never picked it up again. Being popular is overrated. But seriously, but that's what is so freaking cool. Everything that you said before, right? The nuance, the engagement, the little pieces, the little morsels that would not make it anywhere because they get stuck in the internal. All that stuff is now part of the equation, right? And here you are as an executive and you have data points to make decisions, and one of your data points is a community, and eventually in the next few years one of your data points is going to be the outcomes of your models, the models that you train potentially in communities, right? So then this is the part that I wanted to get to. I mean, how does an executive in today's world manage all this to get the true data points and give them validity and weight enough to make a decision based on not only the value of community, but adding the value of community to it? That's the key question that I think we haven't resolved. Everything you said is fantastic. I have nothing bad to say about you yet, but
there's still time.
You're a young person, we can get there somewhere, but I have nothing bad to say about everything you said. But the thing is, I want to get in the next 10, 15 minutes that we have. How does an executive make value out of this shit, including AI potentially? I mean, what do you do? What's the framework that you use, mental or physical or methodology to use all this stuff? And what's the weight and value that it gives to the community? I know there's a lot of questions, so pick any of those and start rapping about those, and then we'll go from there. But that to me is the thing that we haven't figured it out in this new era. AI is one part of it, but the community itself providing value, we haven't figured that out.
I don't know if it's that we haven't figured it out. I don't think it has been put in such a way that it is, a one size fits all scalable approach. Community still requires a massive amount of capacity. And it requires consistent investment. We are moving at the speed of trust, and we are investing in relationships, not just transactions. So one of the, I guess, kind of mental models I have that I kind of keep in my head is what I call the take, care to be calm approach. And, I started my career in the Department of Defense, so I am a fan of a good acronym. So care and calm are acronyms. And so like the C in you're laughing at me, Esteban.
I'm not laughing at you. I'm you know
You
what?
asked
You know
me
what,
for a
Lauren?
framework.
You missed your calling. You would have been a great analyst.
I know, right?
I know. No,
Maybe one
but
day.
seriously, okay, let's go back to the acronym. So care and
So
calm.
take
Yes.
care to be calm. So care and calm. And it was, this framework actually originated out of community work. And so it's thinking about what are those parameters do you have around communication, right? What are those expectations? What are those feedback loops that you are creating? You need to have those in place, that scaffolding in place, that type of pact and agreement before you can move to collaboration, the working with people. And I think it's really important here to say that you're working with and you are working with people towards progress, not necessarily purpose. That's also a bit controversial because your purpose might not be the same as those that are existing in your community. But what can you do to progress together intellectually, physically, whatever it might be for that community? So the C's, you've got to communicate before you can collaborate. The A in care stands for how do you, begin to adapt? How are you understanding this collective memory? So you have to create this large capacity in these community teams, and there might be, some significant turnover in these community teams, depending upon what type of community you are managing, because there might be a lot of emotional and digital labor that are part of this particular role. We can't discount that. And so what are you doing to learn about that community's culture, its values? What are you doing to learn from the past? What are you doing to understand the different contexts and conditions of that community over time? You have to have that ability to adapt before you can start to anticipate the various types of futures. How do you want to work with your community? Not, do something, necessarily, just for your community or to your community. The community is not passive. They are active participants. So what are you doing to anticipate, these different types of futures with your community? What are you doing to think about the different levels of engagement, those different seasons or cycles of engagement? That takes, the scaffolding and, to put in place. That's part of your pact. That's part of your expectation or agreement. And then in order to be able to build resilient communities, the R in care, you need to think about them as regenerative. So you can't just continue to extract and exploit your communities. You can't just keep asking for information, right? You can't just keep asking for X. There needs to be some type of give and take between all members of the community. How are you paying forward? How is this being used to help progress the community, to give back, to nourish, to cultivate the community? So how are those relationships being renewed over time? And that moves us into letting go of command and control leadership, that L in calm. That means we have to be more leaderful. This means we are sharing roles, responsibilities, funding, and resources with our community. Now that's kind of scary for an executive, right? Because wait a second, you want me to share, you want them to have control or to share or have access and influence over what has typically been, well managed. Yeah. Are you dying over there? Am I killing you with my framework?
No. Sorry. I run out of things to say. No, I'm kidding. So let me see if I get this right. Connect. No, what was it? Care, connect, and say it again. Sorry, I had it already before I started
collaborate.
Coughing. Yeah, connect before you can communicate, right?
Yeah.
The second one was adapt. So you can anticipate. So you can anticipate. The R was make it resilience. Make it resilient.
Make it resilient so that you can let go of command and control leadership, be more leaderful.
Yeah.
And then the last one is empathy, obviously. I mean, and it sounds obviously, but not necessarily. I know, right? Like you have to understand what are those trends and patterns of emotionality to all of this, because that's part of your context.
I am the freaking spectrum. I don't understand empathy. I don't recognize the existence of empathy, you know? So, but empathy, obviously, because that way everybody gets the value that you were talking about before.
Yeah. And then ultimately, that empathy leads to being more mindful of how you're bringing the community in, mindful about where they are entering into the decision-making process, into any type of co-creation, co-development process. If you keep this framework in mind, you're going to have your community front and center. You're going to have your community feel as if they are working with you, not for you.
Okay, so that's the care part of the community. This is how you basically build a sustainable, thriving community, basically, right? Recognize everybody, give them the ability to communicate, connect with the people, anticipate and adapt, and make it resilient. So executive leadership the command and control can get out of it. And I love that part, by the way. I mean, resiliency removes command and control out of it because the community survives and subsists with or without the command and control of the company, right?
Yep.
Yeah, I totally love that. And we'll turn some patchouli candles and put some yanni and become empathetic, then that's fine, whatever. But so that now that you build that community the way that you want to build the community, and the next couple minutes before we get to the last couple of questions, what's calm? What's the second part of the
so I gave you both care and calm in tandem.
Okay. Got it.
Yeah.
Sorry. So the L was okay.
Together.
Got it. So they work together.
Yep.
So that is it one internal, one external, or they're like both, basically for build and support and build and maintain, or how do you apply this?
They both have internal and external components.
Okay.
I think that there are internal responsibilities and scaffolding, as well as those external components, scaffolding and participation. And I think that they have to go, hand in hand. And I think if you are taking this care to be calm approach, then you can really start to think about non-extractive, non-exploitive ways to bring your community in to that strategic decision-making process.
Okay. So now let's say, this
you don't sound convinced.
No, I am totally convinced. But here's the thing: it's like I don't like the next question I'm going to ask, so I have to ask it, right? So let's say that you decided that your PhD was a waste of time and museums are a joke and they're never going to go anywhere. You're not saying this, I'm saying this, but it may happen in the future. And you make the stupid mistake of saying, "Oh, I'm going to go back to the corporate America and I'm going to become the community, the community whisperer of corporate America, and I'm going to coach people into developing, using, and enhancing communities for value exchange, right?" Let's say that all this stuff happens. Then what's the advice, the first 2, 3, 4, 5 things that you would do in that role, or that you would coach somebody to do in that role?
If I were being brought in to manage a community or
to be a whisper, to be an advisor to people that want to run communities.
First and foremost, find out what makes your community tick. I mean, first and foremost, you have to know, you have to understand, and the only way you can do that is to truly be immersed in your community. So before you make any type of decision, before you upset anything that's being done, you have to understand your community. You have to understand them in the present. You have to understand their collective memory, and you have to understand where they're trying to progress. So you have to have that past, present, future type of mentality of that community to build that mental model of the community before you do anything, hands down.
Okay. And then let's assume that happens, right? And that's a semi-big assumption.
Now it's time to make a pact. Now it's time to even if
by the way, I'm watching Lucifer on Netflix right now, so the pact that you mentioned is a little different than you were probably expecting to hear. But let's make a pact. I'm good with pacts. Let's go. Ask me for a favor, and then tell me your most innermost desire.
I love, because when I say pact, you have a reaction to it, right? You know that there is a give and take there. It's not it's not a passive agreement, or it's not a passive approach. And I think that is incredibly important. I think so much of what I have had to learn the hard way in community is because things that I took for granted as being known, implicit, were never made explicit. And I think that we have to have an understanding of how our community ticks so that we can create what those value exchanges look like, so that we can really create the parameters around that communication, collaboration, that convening. And I think that pact is super, super important. It gives everybody an understanding of how they show up in the community. And if you don't have that understanding of how you show up in a community, of how that community is functioning, how that community is growing, then I think that you're stuck. Like, I think that whatever you're going to do is going to have maybe a one-off. People are going to feel slighted. They're going to feel, they're not going to feel like you're building some type of authentic, I hate that word, an honest relationship, or wanting to have an honest relationship to move past the transactional. And transaction isn't bad, don't get me wrong, but if you're going to have community, you need to be able to fuse the two. And so part of that is having, make what is implicit explicit. So pact is number 2.
Transaction, by the way, which is a bad word for people, it should be the basis of a community. If you don't create transactions out of your community, there's no purpose to have it. Just it's mental masturbation at its best, and then we all know that doesn't go anywhere. So okay, so you understand what makes and take. You create the pact with the community. You start collecting data, potentially via AI, potentially not. Use the data. I'm sorry.
Then the third step.
Yep.
You want a third step just to round it out so that we are.
I need 2 more
coherent?
steps. I need 5.
You need 2 more steps. Okay. Well,
I
promise 5.
I promise on the build up to this that the next 5 steps. If you listen to everything we say, these are the 5 steps that you take away that you're going to do to make this happen.
So third is building your organizational, your internal capacity for community development, for community engagement, which we talked about, at length earlier in the conversation. You have to create that in place. And then the fourth is create those accountability mechanisms.
Let's go back to create. Hold on. Let's go back to create. How much is this going to cost me? How long is it going to take?
I can't answer that. Every community is different.
No. The capacity, my internal capacity, build my team and staff my team and provide the right tools for my team. What are we talking about?
I can't answer that. It depends. It depends on the community.
Well, give me a range. Are we talking 100,000? We're talking $10 million.
You see, this is where I've gotten into trouble.
Yes, you do, but that's not. I'm not saying that this is a promise. You're not making anybody a promise. You're saying, in my experience, this type of community takes X number of resources to run, which will cost you Y number of dollars. That's all I'm asking you for. I mean,
okay.
And you can say you can pass on that. I mean, I don't want to put you. I don't want to put you.
I think you should have as much resource in your budget as what marketing gets.
Nice. Okay, got it. So you built it up. So now the fourth step, we built it up and we powered it with money, because without money it doesn't work, of course.
The fourth is accountability. So what are you, what accountability mechanisms do you have in place so that pact has teeth?
That's tough. I mean, accountability is a big word, That's a lot of letters.
Yes, it is.
Yeah. Okay, and the fifth one?
The fifth one sounds easy, but it's not easy. And that is to not just make decisions in the present or for the present, but for generations of the community ahead. So think regeneratively. So what are you doing to not just, be in survival mode, but what are you doing to put the mechanisms in place for community sustainability? Go beyond operations. Yeah.
Let me summarize everything that we discussed in the last hour, and before I get to the final question. Don't make it a tokenistic community. Build the scaffolding with the right methodologies and frameworks that you described, so you can actually create true engagement at all levels and leverage that in your operations.
Yeah. You make it sound so easy.
You made it sound easy. I don't know what I'm talking about. I just ask the questions here, So, okay, last question though, I always ask everybody. What do you want to ask me about this or anything else? Your choice. Ask anything.
Where did you have a visceral reaction to what I said?
Which part? I had several visceral reactions to what you
part?
said. Which part?
Which part?
The
Did you have
empathy part?
the most visceral reaction? The empathy part? Why?
Yeah, because I disagree with you and everybody else. I don't think this is about humanistic endeavors. I think this is about transactional, and that's what pisses me off about people. They don't understand. Communities are not humanistic endeavors to make everybody warm, fuzzy, and happy. Communities are part of a transaction that makes the business grow. And if you don't do it the right way, then you don't complete the transaction, then you're leaving the value on the table. I love what you said about value exchange, but if you don't put a transaction behind what you get, you're not getting the value to your company. And we all love to sing Kumbaya together. Yeah. Sorry, go ahead.
I'm glad you said that though, because I think of transactions like table stakes. So I'm glad you made that explicit. No, I
wasn't contradicting what you said. I'm saying what you said is all true, but I'm assuming that what you said. See, I always assume that all the stuff you said is common sense and everybody knows it. And then the next step is like, so what do I do with that? Fuck, make a transaction. And if you're not making a transaction, what's the fucking point of doing it? Right?
That is true.
I mean, that's the bottom line. Life is simple. We're all out to make money. What's the best way to make money? And how do you actually take all these things that are humanistic endeavors and make money out of it? And with that, and having earned my stripes of the day for the sociopathic community of America, I thank you very much. You have been an incredibly valuable guest as always, and we're gonna go and start listening to people call me with names again, which I appreciate because some of those are interesting. And we'll see you next week, which is the 26th, where we're going to be talking to Craig Rosenberg about how automation changes the role of the executive decision making. Lauren, again, thank you very much, and we're out.